Mr. Clerk, we are reporting out of closed session. We have two items. First item, 4.1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item, the motion for the first item of council reporting out of closed session is to receive the report and that confidential direction to staff be confirmed.
Someone like to move that? Ms. Gilland, Councilor Gardner. Comments, questions? Record a vote.
Record vote is being requested for the first item of council reporting out of closed session. Mayor Mrakas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilor Weiss? Councilor Weiss votes yes. Councilor Kim? Councilor Kim votes yes. Councilor Thompson? Councilor Thompson votes yes. Councilor Gardner? Councilor Gardner votes yes. Councilor Gallo is absent. And Councilor Gilland? Councilor Gilland votes yes. The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next item, 4.2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion for council reporting out of closed session, item number 2, is to receive the report and that confidential direction to staff be confirmed.
Mover and a seconder. Councilor Weiss, Councilor Kim. Any comments or questions? Record a vote.
Record vote has been requested for the second item of council reporting out of closed session. Councilor Thompson, how do you vote? Yeah. Councilor Thompson votes yes. Councilor Gardner? Councilor Gardner votes yes. Councilor Gilland? Councilor Gilland votes yes. Councilor Weiss? Councilor Weiss votes yes. Councilor Kim? Councilor Kim votes yes. Mayor Mrakas?
Yes.
And Councilor Gallo. Second item of council reporting out of closed session. Councilor Gallo votes yes. Motion carries.
Confirming bylaw. Councilor Thompson, seconder. Councilor Weiss, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Gardner, Councilor Weiss, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Mr. Clerk, time is 7:02. I'm going to call this council meeting to order. Town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Councilor, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the added delegation? Councilor Weiss, Councilor Thompson, any comments, questions? Call the vote. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Oh, Councilor Gilland.
Thank you. Item, just 1 second here. The one about St. Anne's, the item for discussion. In regards to that one, I just have family who have employment within the school, so I don't know if that would be significant, but just for the sake of caution, I shall recuse myself from voting on that item tonight.
Thank you, Councilor. It's 9.1, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's 9.1. Yeah, I see the clerk saying yes. Okay. Thank you. Any others? Seeing none. Move to community presentations. We have one, our Superintendent Russ Bellman from New York Regional Police, 1 District Command, is here to give an overview of policing in Aurora. Superintendent, welcome. I also see our Deputy Chief is here as well. Deputy, welcome.
Thanks.
Floor is
there
yours.
we go. It's working perfect. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to do this presentation this evening. Before I start, I understand that my presentations are limited to 10 minutes. In reviewing the content, I may exceed that by several minutes. So if the 10-minute mark, you can certainly interrupt me and we can proceed appropriately afterwards. But I just want to let you know that the present is longer than 10 minutes.
So council, instead of interrupting, add an extra 5 minutes just in case. You want that waive procedure, allow that. Councilor Gardner, Councilor Gilliland, all those in favor? Need 2/3 opposed, that carries. You got 50. How's that? Does that work? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my goal here tonight is to briefly introduce myself and provide you with a short presentation on policing in one district. Here we go. And more specifically, policing within the town of Aurora. First, I'd like to introduce Deputy Chief Paulo da Silva, who's behind me, and he is the Deputy Chief in charge of operations, which oversees all 5 districts in York Region with York Regional Police. As well, my second in command, Inspector Stu Garner, who couldn't be here tonight, makes up the command team of one district. You may have met him about a month ago. He attended a town hall meeting here in council chambers as well. So the two of us together make up the command team for one district. So as a brief introduction, I'm the superintendent in charge of number 1 district, and I've been assigned there since October of 2022. I have just over 35 years of policing experience, and the first 12 years of my policing career I spent in this area working at one district. And after a wide variety of assignments and a few gray hairs, I ended up returning to one district. So happy to be here. I've lived in this area since I started my policing career 35 years ago. And my wife's family has a very long history of living in Aurora. So my commitment is both personal and professional to this area for policing. So tonight, I'd just like to give you an overview of the resources and staffing that make up our police district. And then I'd like to provide some specific trends and activity that's been going on in Aurora. I know that there's a few specific types of incidents that have been that are of concern to residents, and I hope to give you a brief summary of that activity and some of the initiatives and measures that we're taking and engaged in to reduce those crimes. So very briefly, picture on the screen is our new station of number 1 district, and it's new. It's been open for about 2 years, and it's in Newmarket. And as you may remember, that prior to that, we were at Prospect Street in Newmarket at an older building for the previous 50 years. So it's an old picture from the early 1970s. So we're happy to move on to a fresher business and a place of business on Harry Walker Parkway in Newmarket. So just to pull back a little bit, one district is the largest of the 5 districts by region. It covers almost 700 square kilometers and serves a population of just over 200,000. And one district is unique in that it serves 4 municipalities of the 9 municipalities in the region: Newmarket, Aurora, King Township, and East Gwillimbury. And it spans the entire width of the region, from Peel region on the west to Durham region on the east and Simcoe County, the northwest. So just to give you an overview of one district, of course, our staffing, the building houses almost 250 members, 238 police officers and 10 civilian members. And then to give you an overview of specifically what policing looks like in one district, I can tell you that our minimum deployment of patrol cruisers on the road is 19, 3 each in Aurora, King Township, and East Gwillimbury, and 9 patrol cars in Newmarket. And we have an additional car that we call a directed patrol vehicle that responds to daily flexibility within the district. So our station is divided into 3 main areas. Uniform division, the first piece, is we often refer to that as the front line. That's the uniform officers in the marked cars out on the road responding to calls for service. There's about 35 officers per platoon. There's 4 platoons, and they work a rotation of 4 days on, 4 days off. They have 4 supervisors, sergeants out on the road, and each platoon is supervised by a staff sergeant who stays in the building. Next, we have our CIB, or Criminal Investigation Bureau, and those are officers that are in the suits and ties, or perhaps they dress down depending on the work that's assigned to them. But they take the reports that the uniform officers attend and file reports, and they're assigned them to further investigate, potentially make arrests and solve those cases. And then finally, we have our core unit, and our core unit is a community-oriented response. And there are 12 officers and 1 sergeant. And as their name suggests, they respond to community concerns. The unit is broken into 2 teams of 6. And the first team is dedicated to traffic enforcement. And they respond to concerns that are brought forward by residents or members of council, such as yourself, whether it's speeding, stop sign violations, dangerous or careless driving in certain areas, or perhaps unsafe driving in school areas. The other side of our core unit is a street enforcement team, and they're in uniform, but unlike the frontline uniform officers, they have more flexibility and respond to concerns of the community. They interact with bylaw department and other community groups, and they will target areas that are known for increased areas of thefts, drug trafficking, or other concerns to the residents. And some of the repeat offenders, those officers get to know them. They're in uniform and they are more familiar with the local concerns of all of the communities. So in effect, they're a district support team. And then the core unit, the 2 sides of the core unit, will come together and manage community events, Aurora Santa Claus Parade, or any other memorials, anything that requires traffic management or crowd management on a municipal level. Our core unit will look after that. So perhaps some of you actually had reason to deal with some of our core officers. So I'd like to talk specifically about Aurora. I mentioned that there was a minimum of 3 patrol cars assigned to Aurora. Some people think maybe that's not a lot. However, what I can also say is that the full support of York Regional Police through our specialized resources. And I'm just going to go through those very briefly, just so you have an idea of the extent of York Regional Police's capabilities when serious or significant issues impact Aurora, and that we can access those. So the first one is our real-time operations center. It's staffed by an inspector and three staff sergeants, 4 now, I think, and a research analyst. And they're 24/7. So there's a senior officer on duty 24/7, not the same officer, shift work, obviously. But they provide frontline and investigative oversight for the entire region. So they can see, they're housed beside our 911 communications center. So they look after all of the operational, live, real-time needs of policing in the region. Our next area is our air support unit. Last year, we purchased a new helicopter to replace our 20-year-old helicopter. And our air support provides support to officers on the road for all types of calls. And it has the ability to respond very quickly anywhere in the region, obviously. It could be used to search for missing or vulnerable people, searching for suspects who have fled a crime scene or fled from the police. And also, it's been very successful in tracking stolen vehicles, which avoids police pursuits, which, as we know, are very dangerous. The next pieces are business intelligence technology. So our business intelligence and data analytics unit has developed quite significant technology, which you may be aware of, which essentially brings together a number of different databases and systems and allows officers on the road, in their car, to view all of that information together through various layers and maps. And it provides enhanced information and awareness to those officers. They can find addresses of people who are on bail, on parole, who have committed similar crimes in certain neighborhoods. They can also be aware of what other crimes have happened in a neighborhood that they're driving through. And it gives them an increased awareness of what's going on in their community without having to reach out to a data analytics team. It's presented to them right on the spot. So it's quite effective. For road safety, so additional traffic enforcement is provided by a road safety unit, and it's split into 2 halves. So if there's speeding concerns or other increased traffic violations, they can respond to that in addition to our core unit and in addition to our uniform officers. As well, they also have a major collision investigative unit, and they're responsible for investigating collisions involving fatalities or serious life-threatening injuries. Our canine unit, right now we have 14 police services dogs who are used in a variety of capacities, very similar to our air support unit. They can track missing or vulnerable people or people that have fled from the police. Our police services dogs are also trained in the detection of drugs, explosives, firearms. And I just found out the other day that one dog is trained in the detection of currency. So if you've got cash in your hand, smell cash. And they can also be sent into buildings to track or to search for people that might be hiding from the police. Our emergency response unit is our tactical team, and they are used to respond to critical incidents where weapons have been or are being used, and they deal with armed and barricaded situations or hostage situations. Mental health support team. So as we'll see from the calls for service a little later in the presentation, mental health is a large portion of our police response. So the mental health support team pairs up a plainclothes police officer with a crisis worker, and they will attend calls for people in crisis, and they'll provide additional resources and support. They'll liaise with the hospital crisis workers to provide a more seamless response to people in crisis over and above our frontline uniform response. And finally, our investigative services. So when there's incidents that are beyond the capacity of the district level investigators, we have a whole host of specialty units that will take on higher, more complex investigations. Our special victims unit that deals with child abuse and sexual assaults, our holdup unit, our major fraud unit, our homicide unit, and our guns and gangs and drug enforcement unit, and so on. So this is just a brief snapshot of all the additional support and resources available that can be drawn on by the police when we're policing Aurora. And Aurora has the unique advantage that our regional headquarters is in Aurora on Don Hill Drive. And the majority of those specialty units that I just described are housed out of that facility. So I just want to briefly get into calls for service. In 2023, there were just under 5,000 calls by residents of Aurora to the police. And these are the top 10 calls for service, and they make up roughly half of those 5,000 calls. So when we see the first one, or it's reverse order, but on the bottom of the page, you'll see that motor vehicle collisions are the highest number in the mid 500s. And just to jump down or jump up to 2 there, the impaired driving. So there was 253 calls by residents of Aurora for suspected impaired drivers. And of those 250 calls, just over 50 resulted in an arrest for impaired driving. So 1 in 5. And that's pretty consistent in other districts, but it just shows the importance of the messaging of calling 911 when you suspect you're following an impaired driver. 1 in 5 from a police response ends up being an impaired driver. So I'm sort of jumping around a little bit, but other than 2 up from that, the domestic violence, other than the domestic violence and the impaired driving, those are 2 criminal offense-based calls for service. The remainder of the top 10 are non-criminal incidents. You'll see the suspicious persons calls, the check welfare, the disputes, and then more general sounding calls like assist citizen, people in crisis. So what it shows is that, especially for check welfare calls, that's a fairly significant number. That shows that the residents of Aurora are calling for a variety of reasons to check on fellow residents, whether it's a neighbor they haven't heard from in a couple of days, somebody on the street that looks like they're struggling, a whole host of reasons, somebody sitting in a car that just doesn't look right or feel right. It shows that the residents are comfortable calling the police for situations like that. And then that leads into the assist ambulance calls. Often ambulance EMS is responding to medical, which evolves into potentially people in crisis that requires a police assistance. Same with the direct persons in crisis calls, the disputes, and the suspicious person calls, similar to the check welfare, but sometimes they may be suspicious and a resident might feel maybe this person's suspicious and they might be looking at committing a theft or a break and enter. That's information that we will respond to. We may get information.
Keep going.
It may be a little bit of information, but it adds to the puzzle of solving crimes that are reported to us. So just want to move into the sort of the top three crimes of, I call them public interest. Now, the stolen vehicles, which obviously is a very, very hot topic right now, very concerning, not just here in Aurora, but everywhere. As well, thefts from vehicles, the break-ins to the cars, and the residential break-and enters. So I've just got a couple of brief charts that show the statistics in Aurora for 2023 and the first few months of 2024, just to give you an idea of what the numbers in relation to those crimes are. So the first one is stolen vehicles. So the dark blue squiggly line there is month by month, and they're the number of stolen cars from Aurora per month. So they range between about 6 and 10 vehicles per month. Sounds like a lot. In York region, 400 a month are stolen. It's an astounding statistic that has escalated so much over the last couple of years. So putting it in perspective of other areas of the region, it's fairly low. It doesn't make it any better, but it's something that becomes a little more manageable. And we get into thefts from vehicles. That's the break-ins to the cars. And statistically, virtually every break into a car is a crime of opportunity. The people that we do arrest from time to time, they just wander through neighborhoods checking car doors. And if 1 in 10, 1 in 20 cars are unlocked, that's the opportunity. Very, very rarely does somebody actually physically smash into a car just to steal the contents from the car. So that's something that, again, for Aurora, we're 5 to 7 occurrences a month. That might also be a very underreported crime. People may feel that they don't need to report that. So that's something that that we constantly work on, and it's obviously of concern to the residents. And then finally, the residential break and enters. Ever since COVID, the residential break and enters have decreased significantly, partially because people are working from home, and generally the people that are breaking into residences don't want people at home. So that number has decreased significantly. In Aurora, we're looking 3, 4, 5, 6 per month. And it peaks certain times of the year, or some specific peaks, it's a specific group responsible. And our detective office, or CIB office, has had fairly good success with some arrests, seizures of property, and in residential break and enters. So it's something we constantly pay attention to with increased patrols in the area and awareness of crime prevention measures. And we're constantly monitoring that. So the big question is, what are we doing about these crimes? And it's sort of a multi-pronged approach. When these crimes come up, our CIB investigative officers will launch investigative projects. They'll have bits of information, suspect names, suspect vehicles. They'll launch an investigation. The uniform officers will be directed using their business intelligence tools, or just simply interacting with the other officers, increasing patrols in those areas, stopping suspicious vehicles. We've had good success with the stolen vehicles overnight. Generally in this area, the overnight traffic isn't as high. So when vehicles are seen driving suspiciously, we have had good success with arrests from these stolen vehicles. And our core unit, again, they target specific areas. If there's local offenders, repeat offenders involved, the core unit generally knows who they are and work with our investigators and analysts to come up with arrests and solutions. And the other piece is that we also have large scale investigations and community awareness projects. There's Operation Auto Guard that deals with the stolen vehicles. And you may have seen that in the media over the last few months. And it was a combination of community awareness. We had the issuing the Faraday bags to protect your keys from being detected. I think I might even have one here in my pocket. Took it from my wife's car, so I should remember. Anyway, Faraday bag, so prevents radio signals from your key fob by being detected from the software and equipment that these criminals have in order to launch it. So it protects that. So we were giving those out for quite a while, and they seem to be quite effective. As well, this Operation Auto Guard was the community piece and the awareness. but also it involved a large-scale investigative project, multi-agency provincial task force, of which York Regional Police was a major participant. And we've had some significant arrests and seizures, the media lately, where vehicles are found in containers in Montreal, destined for out of the country. So basically, to wrap things up, we also involve ourselves with different crime prevention initiatives. We have our CCTV community camera program, which is about to start this month. We also have SEPTED services, so the crime prevention through environmental design, where residents or business owners can seek out the assistance of police, crime prevention officers, to provide them with information on making their business or residents less vulnerable to break-ins or thefts. We also have the security camera registry, where residents and businesses who have security cameras can register with York Regional Police. So that way, when we are investigating crimes, we now know which residences or which businesses have CCTV. So it's quicker for us to speak to them, potentially access their video. And then as well, we have our community safety data portal, which I believe a month ago, the town hall meeting had a direct presentation about that. And it allows community members to access our data to show precisely what's going on. And by increasing the information, it reduces the speculation and the concerns. We're trying to be as transparent and accurate as possible. So that wraps it up for my presentation. Again, I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback or comments from you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Superintendent. Council, first, can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Kim, Councillor Thompson, any questions to the presentation? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for your work. I have a couple of questions. I thought I saw a person in crisis, and I called in, and a young man, and a fully uniformed officer came, and the young man saw the officer and ran away. So is there an opportunity, or are there plainclothes police people that respond to a person in crisis?
Superintendent?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. So obviously the frontline officers who are out on the road, they're generally the first officers that will respond to the call. So timing, they're the first ones to respond. Our mental health support team has a plainclothes police officer, and they're in plainclothes for that very reason, because often people who are in crisis might not respond as calmly to uniform presence. So our mental health support team will attend those calls, and with a crisis worker present can have a better opportunity at de-escalating situations. So it can, you're right, it absolutely is something that we're aware of and try to keep tabs on.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if I would make that call again, I would say a possible person in crisis, and then maybe somebody who wasn't in uniform would come.
Superintendent?
Because it wasn't a matter of urgent timing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right. I think the thing is, if you call 911, that's the fastest response. And generally the uniform officers, the frontline officers are there. Our response time's very quick. We're 5-6 minutes into a response time. Mental health support team, there aren't as many of those. So it's a longer time to respond. And so they have to be obviously somewhat more selective. So if it's a case where the person in crisis is fine with the uniform officer, which may be the case, or EMS often attends. So mental health support team will attend, and it's usually the frontline officer that requests that. If they realize that they're not getting very far, they will ask for the mental health support team.
Councillor?
Through Mr. Mayor, second question. I'm at a homeless person outside a grocery store in Newmarket. It was clear to me that he was in pain. So I didn't know what to do. Severe pain. Would I have called the police and said, can you, but it would again have to have been a plainclothes person who came.
Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. I think that's where when we see the calls for service or check welfare, suspicious persons, and that they're quite high, that's because people call and they'll call 911. Uniform officer will respond again because they're close by, but absolutely they will engage the services of the mental health support team.
Counselor.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, third question. When I went door to door in the last election, for the first time in many elections, the first complaint was not taxes, it was speeding. So I know you mentioned speeding, but that's only if you could witness somebody speeding. Like, is there anything you can do to help me help my residents?
Superintendent.
Mr. Mayor. So absolutely. So I mentioned that our core unit responds to traffic enforcement issues. We also have the ability to, we have a device because of limited time, but a device called an armadillo that will track speeding in a specific area. It's mounted on a pole, and we can get a statistical timeline. And that way, if a resident is saying they're speeding on my street, we can use this device. It's set up for a week, and then we can review and say, look, here's when most of the speeding takes place. Or in fact, maybe the speeding isn't as bad as the resident saying, but we can provide that detailed information to the resident and then take action. We can set up our radar there and do that. So absolutely, we will respond to that type of concern. And that's what our core unit is.
Counselor.
So if I called you as a counselor and said, there's a problem on whatever street, what would you do? You would check the street you would use your equipment to see if there actually was a speeding problem first, and then what would you do?
Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So absolutely. Our core unit is specifically designed for that. So if you called us, then the core unit would attend, probably speak to the resident and find out exactly the details. Maybe there wasn't a necessity for the tracking, and they may say, hey, if this is when the speeding is, no problem. We'll set up here every Thursday or every Friday and run radar enforcement.
Council.
Thank you. And just out of interest, that those residents that mostly spoke to me were just about speeding, were just on residential streets, and it would have been their neighbors. And I don't think you could do anything about that.
Thank you. Councilor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Superintendent, for the insightful presentation. It's wonderful data that the police retains from the calls, and I'm just wondering, do you have like a dot plot where you keep track of calls by location within the municipality, and do you have it by call type, like? Certain areas might have more stolen cars, certain area might have more domestic violence, and I see you're nodding, so I'll stop.
Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. Our community safety data portal, which is accessible by the public, captures that information, and then even in more detail from our own investigative tools, absolutely tracks location. So many different pieces of information. So we have a full unit of crime analysts. They work at our district. There's an analyst within our real-time operations center, our intelligence unit. So the analysts absolutely can look at that information, and it's accessible to all of us. So the detail is actually quite amazing how much. And now with our business intelligence tools, that information can actually be relayed to the officers out on the road. They can access that right on the computer in their car and see a history of what's happened in the neighborhood, how often. And it's actually a bit of an information overload. It's a lot of information, a lot of data, but it's absolutely useful.
Councilor.
Thank you, and through you, when you have that the call operator, when they receive a call for domestic violence or child violence, do they tactically say, well, certain officers on duty are more trained in a certain area, or is it pretty well like all? I'm sure all officers are trained in all manner of issues, and so anyone can answer, or do you guys focus on certain?
Superintendent?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. So as I said, normally 911 is the call. Very quick response in this community for sure. And the response is coming from frontline uniform officers. They then can assess things very quickly and decide if they need a specialty unit to take over. If the crime, if it's a serious domestic, we have a intimate partner violence unit that deals with high risk intimate partner violence cases, so they can engage and take over. But it's the frontline uniform that does the initial response, because that's where the initial report is generated, the initial assessment of what's gone on, and then it can be moved out into more specialty units. But absolutely.
Council?
And lastly, would this data or information be available to us or town staff at all, or is that privy to police staff?
Superintendent?
For you, Mr. Mayor. So the community data safety portal, obviously it shows crime trends that are happening in the area, but obviously we have privacy concerns. Everybody on the street doesn't need to know if there's a domestic violence incident at their neighbor's house. That's a huge privacy concern. So that information doesn't get relayed. Generally, it's the information about public safety. What's the concern to the residents? If there's thefts in the area, there's break-ins to the area. So things of a domestic violence nature are much more protected from public scrutiny.
Councilor?
Okay, great. Thank you.
You, Councilor Gillen?
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation today. It's always a joy having you guys here and giving us the scoop on Aurora and York Region, and knowing that we're in good hands. So I really do appreciate that. My comments were also on the community safety data portal. I know that's something you guys have had in the works for quite some time now, at least 2018, I believe. That's probably when it was in pilot, maybe. And you guys are like the first of its kind in Canada. Is that correct?
Superintendent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Exactly. So it was something that was designed by York Regional Police. Certainly there's analytical tools out there, different things, but what we recognized was that even within our own police organization, we had different silos of information, different types of record keeping. And whether it was calls for service, like we saw the statistic there, that's within our dispatch system, there's the report system, the investigative system, the national database of CPIC and people on charges and bail. So all of those are sitting separate. So our data analytics tool, part of which goes to the community portal, it grabs all of those pieces of information. So the officer in the car can see an address, and without accessing the whole report that maybe historically is at that address, they can read the narrative and very quickly get up to speed on what's happened in that neighborhood. So that's the beauty of this system, is that it grabs pieces from all the different silos and brings it together, and then lays it out in a very easy format, whether it's for the officers or for the public through the data.
Councilor?
Thank you. And with that comment, I know that I've done some community crime prevention seminars as well. And I think the education piece is to always report, because if you don't report, we don't know that there's a trend going on in a certain area. And I think it's kind of the point of this data portal, so you can capture some of that information, because data is king. So just with that, if maybe you can maybe explain, that there is a report of crime and also report community concern, and maybe the difference between the two, and just kind of touch on how important that is for this data portal.
Superintendent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. So, we hear stories of people calling 911 for inappropriate reasons. It's not an emergency. We have the ability to, from our website, a simple email, info@yrp.ca, and that's for the community to send information. It could be anything from there's an event coming up that I need assistance for, or exactly what you say, I saw some kids, or here's a license plate of something I saw. It's not in progress. The person feels that they don't have to call 911 or the non-emergency dispatch. They don't need to see an officer right there, so they can access or provide the information through that method. We also have different road watch for driving concerns. So there's a number of different ways that the members of the public can provide information to us. It doesn't always have to be emergency calls.
Counselor?
Great, thank you. And I guess with that as well, just trying to reignite that neighborhood watch. I know that obviously there's people in the community that are a little bit more concerned about auto thefts and break and enters. We've obviously had that conversation about the stats and, overall how we're pretty good hands here, but just reigniting the neighborhood watch and where would people go to get information if they wanted to create their own?
Superintendent?
Through you,
Through you.
Mr. Mayor. So our Community Services Bureau has a bunch of different areas, including our crime prevention officers. So there's a crime prevention officer assigned to each of the 5 districts, and they will absolutely get involved in setting up neighborhood watch programs. And it's facilitating it. Obviously, it's neighborhood run, but the officer will facilitate that, explain some of the methods that work and what doesn't work, and information sharing. And that's the big thing. It's the information sharing, because as we know, if we only have this much information and there's gaps, people can fill it with misinformation. So it's absolutely a vital resource, and it engages the neighborhoods. And it's that's something that's important, because then everybody's watching out for each other, and they can identify when something doesn't look right in their neighborhood much quicker.
Great.
Counselor?
Thank you. And I guess the final comment I'll make is I know that there is a YouTube video. I think it's Officer De Silva. I think you actually showcase in it called a Community Safety Data Portal. So I'm sure you could do a search in YouTube. There'll be an official YRP video. And I think it's a great thing to share in the community. I often send it in my newsletters as a reminder for people and just they know how to use it. It's pretty simple. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Counselor Thompson.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you to you and the other officers and all the staff at YRP for all you do for our community. Just had a question with regards to the calls for service slide that you put up on the screen. You indicated that there were roughly 5,000 calls from the public in 2023. Are those just 911 calls, or do they also include those non-emergency calls that you spoke of? And then the second part of my question, which is sort of you answered it previously, is when is it appropriate to call 911, and when is it appropriate to use the other means to contact YRP?
Superintendent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously we get the messaging out about calling 911, in progress crime, following an impaired driver, life-threatening incidents. Sometimes there is, and we see it, that there's a blurred area. People will call 911 and it's not that serious. So there is, there's that education out there of calling the non-emergency line. It ends up into our communications branch as well. And in answer to your question, most of those calls would have been 911 calls. There's not that many that come in through the non-emergency line relating to those types of calls. So they're the majority are 911 calls. Yes.
Counselor?
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, Superintendent, thank you very much for coming. I actually just wanted to remind everyone, and you brought it up about the real-time ops center. It's actually incredible if you get a chance to go look at it. I know council last term, we got an opportunity, some of us, to come out and take a tour and see how basically everything works there. And it's quite a sight. And maybe Superintendent, is if it's possible that maybe we could set up one of those times that council, and maybe it's not just this council, but maybe the N6, reach out to all of us, and we can make a day out of it and come out there and kind of go through everything and see day in the life of our York Regional Police Services. Absolutely. Having been a duty inspector for a number of years, it's familiar territory. So happy to arrange a tour and show you the behind the scenes features. Absolutely. So I'd appreciate that. Yeah, and we can talk about that. And the other thing, I just wanted to thank you as well. I know we meet regularly every month, and we just actually met was it the beginning of this week? Or no, last week, just last week. And they're great conversations to kind of, for both of us to know exactly what's going on, and they're so valuable. And it's not just for me to bring some of the concerns of the residents, but also what council's let me know to let you know that these are the issues that we're hearing as a group. So I appreciate the time and effort that you put in for that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, council, call the vote. That carries. Deputy Chief Superintendent, thank you for coming. You can stay if you'd like. Okay. You got more important work to do. Okay. We appreciate you coming in. Thank you for all the service that you guys do. So council, we got delegation, one delegation, 6.1, Sheryl Thomas, Marquee Theatrical Productions regarding item 8.2.2. Sheryl, welcome. You got 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Honorable Mayor and members of council, my name is Sheryl Thomas and I'm the founder and executive director at Marquee Theatrical Productions. And thank you very much for squeezing me in today. I'm hoping to provide some clarity and insight to comments that were made in a recent complaint to council regarding the proposed residency status for Marquee at the new Town Square Theatre. I wanted first to share that Marquee is a registered charity and not a business that is owned by one person or even a partnership. Our business is to serve the community through our educational programs and our public performances. That's over 55 public performances, presentations annually at present. We do a lot. As our operations expand, so does our outreach, allowing us to extend these beneficial programs to the town of Aurora. We currently cater to over 800 registered students annually and entertain over 20,000 audience members. Supported by a dedicated base of volunteers, we actively participate in numerous town events, which I will elaborate on shortly. Highlighted within the complaint letter are several key questions and statements that warrant further discussion. Quote, other arts groups were not approached by the town for formal consultation and or given the opportunity to express interest in a partnership of any kind. It was also mentioned that this town asset was built with one organization in mind from the start. It should be made clear that we were not approached by the town for this opportunity. Rather, Marquee, me, had an idea and I came to the town. I contacted Phil Rose. It was my brainchild about the residency thing. And that's where it began. It was just an idea that I thought could potentially benefit both parties, both the town and maybe Marquee. We are often called upon by the town, the BIA, chamber, local schools, and other organizations to get involved in events. Marquee and our volunteers have taken part in the following town events since 2012. Santa Under the Stars and July 1st parades, Haunted Forest, Haunted Greenhouse during COVID, the Christmas Market, the Town Staff Kids Holiday Party, the Teen Idol, Aurora Performing Arts Festival, Movies in the Park, Concerts in the Park, Cultural Campfire, Family Campfire Interactive Story Time, and there are definitely more. Our volunteer hours provided for these events are not headed by youth. Some of them are definitely carried out by youth as part of the team, though. Marquee has not contributed a small amount of time to the town as outlined in the letter, nor does it set a precedent for any group or organization to contribute a similar amount of hours to expect compensation. I say this simply because we are one of the top 3 organizations, the groups, to give this amount of time and professional expertise to the town. We have not been doing these events in the past for any form of personal gain. We have a strong understanding of the value of a healthy community, and that is our goal. The arrangement is for us to continue to provide our regular town event participation that brings value to the town by way of enhancing the events as we provide leadership, actors, performances, costumes, and set pieces, and everything that is required for each event. We simply organize all of the rehearsals and we show up to perform. The town doesn't have to do anything other than that, than just saying, hey, come take part. We are not taking jobs away from any potential town staff. These are events that give a town a heartbeat. It brings outside people to our town and take part. And while there, they shop at our stores, and some people even fall in love with this town and maybe even move here. One owner spoke about difficulties they have had in booking dates at the Newmarket Theatre due to preferential treatment that we get, Marquee. And as a user group, I think most of you know that we have no control over scheduling at any theater or any town facility. We simply put in our requests and it can be accommodated. If it can be accommodated, then we are beyond thrilled. We do have a 22-year loyal, longstanding history with that theater. So that comes with consistent booking times, and it's also good business to do that. So I will share that we too have been bumped on 2 occasions at the theater. So the bumping had nothing to do with Marquee. The last quote that I'd like to address is regarding the question of consistent use of the facility by Marquee. Someone asked for an exact definition of how this affects other local cultural groups and their ability to book space at Town Square. Consistent use simply means dates that align with our performance periods for our educational programming. It doesn't mean exclusive use. The dates would be consistent for a period of 5 years. This is something any theater school needs to promise a performance for the families who take part in our programming. Over the proposed timeframe of requested use in 3 areas of the new theater, the dance studio, the performance hall, and the program room, Marquee will be paying a minimum of $142,000 between 2025 and 2028.
Cheryl, can I just get you to wrap up?
Yep,
Thank
I'm on my last thing. I hope that I've been able to provide at least some clarity to these items. And there you go.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Council, can I get a motion to receive delegation? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner, questions, Councillor Reese.
Thanks, Sheryl. I appreciate you coming here today, and thank you for taking my call today when I wanted to have some of those questions answered, and you answered them very well. I got a few other things that I'd like to say when we get when the item comes forward, but I really believe in the not-for-profit work that you do, the amount of work that goes into building a not-for-profit successfully that you've done over the past, I don't know how many years, 20 years perhaps. And I've enjoyed the plays that you've put on, and I appreciate them. So thank you for doing the things that you do here.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Cheryl, thank you very much for coming. Obviously, the work that Marquee and yourself do is tremendous to our community, and we appreciate everything. I've always said volunteers are the backbone of our community, and you guys are show that spirit. It's alive and well. So thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. Call the vote. Carries. Let's move to consent agenda. Someone like to move those items? Councillor Kim, Councillor Thompson, any questions on those items? Call the vote. That carries. So we'll move to 8, which is Committee of the Whole Meeting Report of April 2nd. So this is any items that anyone wants to pull out of all items in 8. Councilor Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The regional report.
8.9.1.
Thank you.
At all?
Oh, I want to pull some bylaws, but
I'd be after. Councilor Gallo.
8.8.1, please.
Environmental Advisory Committee. Or 8.8.1. Anything else? Councilor Gilliland.
8.4.2.
Anybody else? Councilor Reese.
8.2.2.
Any others? We got a motion to approve all items minus 8.2.2, 8.4.2, 8.8.1, and 8.9.1. Councillor Ken, seconder. Councillor Garner. Call a vote. That carries. 8.2.2, Councillor Weiss, you pulled that. Do you want to move the recommendation out of committee?
So that we have 1 and 2 separately. We good?
Yeah, but it's, you can move both of them at the same time, but when we call the vote, we can split.
Fair enough.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Weiss, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I pulled this was basically because of the conversation and the comment that Councillor Thompson had at the committee of the whole, in that he wanted to ask some questions about public consultation and the rest of it. And I want to thank Sheryl for explaining that the public consultation was, in your case at least, was one way, not the other way. But it did bring up a point, and I had questions from other business owners that are in the performing arts area that asked the same questions about why nobody had come out and asked them about using the space, the permitted space, the dance studio, the performance center, and any other permitting. And I believe at last committee of the whole, I asked the questions about allocation policies for this. And I really think we need to have an allocation policy. And if there's one, I'd like to hear about it. But if there isn't, then this kind of thing can be, I think, mitigated by having an allocation policy that we have much the same as in our sports fields with our pools. This is a facility that is a valued facility. It could be used by many, many different people if they just know about it. So I'm wondering what kind of outreach has been done, in fact, if 5 or 6 people have not been reached with their interest. And number 2, if we could, if there is an allocation policy under review, so it can come back to council, so we can look at it the way as we do sports field allocations. So through you to probably Mr. Furman or Mr. Rose, who's I think online now. I'll ask you to decide where.
Rose.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Weiss. I guess I'll take the first question or the question about the allocation policy first. I am looking at it here on my screen. It is it's the Aurora Town Square Space Usage and Permitting Policy. It was put together and approved by council on April 26th of 2022. So in terms of that policy, I'm more than happy to share it with Councillor Weiss and all of council. It is very clear in terms of the priority that we place on who gets space or who will have allocation priority at Town Square. I believe, as mentioned at the last committee of the whole, we do prioritize the town, including the museum, as far as space allocation at Town Square. Second is the Cultural Center and the Public Library as our 2 partners in the project. And then we have our cultural partners and Aurora-based not-for-profit groups. So in terms of the allocation priority, I know that we are abiding by that as far as working with Marquee as a local not-for-profit cultural organization. Further down the list, I think 2 further down the list are for-profit businesses. So we prioritize the board of the school boards, and then we prioritize after that the local businesses. So just from an allocation perspective, organizations like Marquee that the town relies on from a special event, a volunteer perspective, and has had a relationship for a number of years, they do get priority over local not for-profit businesses. Along that same line, in terms of the consultation process, just taking that as our starting point, we consulted with our cultural partners, specifically the ones that provide theater or drama services here in the community, those being Theater Aurora, Marquee, and in some respects, the Cultural Center as one of the main programmers at Town Square. And so that's the consultation we did. And we had conversations with Theater, Aurora, and Cultural Center. No issues whatsoever with Marquee being the resident theater group. We didn't, as mentioned previously, do a full RFP or call for other local businesses. Again, just based on the premise that we prioritize local not-for-profit charitable organizations in the cultural sector over and above our for-profit community.
Counselor?
Thank you. So there will be no outreach. I think this is very good information that you've shared here tonight, and I appreciate you getting the allocation policy that's in place. I'm hoping it looks similar to what's in the sports field, et cetera, because it was very fair and well done, and it mitigates a lot of problems. So thanks for that. But from that right now, I assume that you are looking at opportunities to fill the Performing Arts Center, the dance studio, the programming areas. So are you actively pursuing those other areas, not just our cultural partners, but others in the community? Through you, Mayor.
Sheryl?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Weiss. We are indeed, yes, we are currently filling the calendar for the remainder of 2024 into August of 2025. Again, based on the allocation policy, we're working with the Cultural Center, our local cultural groups, first and foremost, as well as the library. We are currently keeping a wait list of for-profit and other organizations looking for space at Town Square. So the time frame that we're looking at is by May 1st, we will be able to, which is just around the corner, have all of the towns as well as the cultural centers and the libraries request for space into our ActiveNet software. Subsequent to that, we're going to reach out to the remaining cultural organizations to see if they have any space requirements or booking requirements or needs for the remainder of this year into 2025. And I believe as of June 1st, we'll go out to the wider community. And we have a marketing and communication campaign that we have to promote Town Square as a rental venue for conferences, for bookings, for AGMs, whatever it might be. So we're currently working down the priority allocation list, again, starting with the town, the cultural center, the library, and our cultural groups. So as of June 1st, we'll go out to the wider community to seek anybody interested in space at Town Square.
Counselor?
Very helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Counselor, you want this separated? No? Okay. Call a vote. That carries. 8.4.2, budget timeline. Councillor Gilliland, did you want to move that recommendation?
So is this 8.4.2? Okay, all right. Really, it was just a question. Yes, I will move forward with that.
Seconder? Councillor Gardner, thank you. Councillor Gilliland, go ahead.
Thank you. It's just the report that I had downloaded, still had the original reduce from 30 to 27. So I wanted to have clarity. And now that I have it up here, I can confirm that that was what was discussed because I wasn't here last time. So I'm okay with that. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. 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 Any other comments, questions? Call a vote. That carries. 8.8.1, Councillor Gallo, you pull this one. Just want to move that?
Don't want to move it. I'm just pulling it to exercise my vote against. Thanks.
Okay. Someone like to move that? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Kemp, thank you. Any comments, questions? Call a vote. Nope. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I was just trying to pull it up on the agenda. I actually did have a lot of questions about this, but I wasn't here last time. So I have a few things. First First of all, some of the things about this that concern me are, there's a few things. One, I guess the real basic question is, any other municipalities do this at all? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, maybe you know, have you spoken to other municipalities that do it?
Ms. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are aware of some municipalities that do it, but not the full extent of what their program is.
Counselor?
Thank you. Within Ontario, through you, Mr. Mayor?
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Counselor?
Thank you. Okay, I'm just curious as to what capacity. I haven't seen any. I've talked to a few other municipalities, and from what I understand, a lot of it, what's being proposed isn't really feasible. Some questions I have is, I'll just name a few, is obviously the low water maintenance versus maintenance I would suggest is very subjective, because it's low maintenance in water doesn't mean that's low maintenance and maintenance. Just having my horticultural background, it's a higher amount of work to make sure that it's kept clean and free of debris. You're talking about specialized perennials and plants and maintaining that. And I also have concerns maybe even about the staff and their operational costs in order to identify what is considered a low maintenance plant, what's a weed, what's not a weed. And I do feel this can actually open up Pandora's box, because it becomes very subjective, and that could increase the cost of staff and also the type of staff that you hire in order to identify the type of plantings. Some other concerns that I have is just general maintenance with snow plowing. You have the sidewalk plow going by, and you could be arbitrarily moving some dry rocks around and stuff, and perhaps that could be a problem. And then the question is, who's going to repair that damage? I mean, at that point, I would suggest it's the homeowner. But then, I also question the liability of the type of landscaping. So, for instance, if there's some river rock, then, if that spills onto a sidewalk and it's on a town boulevard, then who's liable? So I have a lot of questions about that. And I just feel like there's just a lot of issues with the way that this is written. And having spoken with other municipalities and understanding that they don't have it, and these are some of the high reasons why, my first initial reaction was, maybe perhaps in, areas like, I don't know, Texas, Arizona, or California, maybe if we had those kinds of concerns, that might be the trend. But, having the pleasure of maintaining some prominent properties in my landscaping days with the famous George Tanaka and Dunnington Grubb, completely two different architectural designs, but they definitely have a really high intense care, just because there's ones maybe with pruning and topiaries, the other ones with rocks and more low maintenance, low watering plants doesn't mean that it's not high maintenance. Other questions I have is third parties. So for instance, we have telecommunications out now that's doing some work, whether it's them or Enbridge or something or so forth. I understand that the requirements really by them really would be to replace with sod. It's not within their contracts or agreements or understanding that, if there's a shrub there by some of the services, or there's rocks or a design. I just foresee there's just a lot of barriers to this. And I can kind of foresee that this is probably not something that I think that staff would recommend. I feel there's a lot of problems with it. I also think that we're opening Pandora's box to a lot of property standards that could be very, very subjective. And at this time, just, understanding what Xeriscaping is and what it looks like and a lot of the challenges around it, for me, I just feel like this is probably not something that would be appropriate for Aurora. So I'm just going to leave with those comments, but I feel I was very, I think I had a lot of great points there. I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment to that, but that's kind of where I stand on this. Thank you.
Yes,
Councilor Russ?
thank you. Similarly, this xeriscaping typically comes out of arid climates, and for water conservation, I'm all for water conservation. Don't get me wrong there. But my real question around this, and the way it's written, is to direct staff to report back on the feasibility. And so maybe it's my worry about overloading staff on something. And I'm wondering what the amount of time the mayor may be thinking would be into this in order to bring back a fulsome report that council can decide whether to move in this direction, because it has significant impacts on the way our town looks if it goes through. And I've seen a number of pictures elsewhere where this has been done, and sometimes it's not very pleasant. So through you, Mayor, maybe to yourself or maybe to Mrs. Camp. I don't know where this is going to land.
Ms. Camp, how extensive and how long do you report?
And timing, of course, and everything.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't considered when we would bring this back to council currently. We just have to look at their agenda, but I would suspect it would be sometime in the fall as per staff time allocated to research and look at all the factors from other neighboring municipalities that do have some programs in place and take everything into consideration. I don't know, maybe a week or two of staff time to look through everything and come up with a comprehensive report so council can formulate an opinion and come to a decision.
Thank
Councillor?
you. Thank you. Answer the questions. Great.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, well, just generally. I think that the town tried something like this on the medians on Wellington and also on at least one roundabout, I think in the Mavronack area. I think it was a good idea, but it didn't end up looking very good. And also through the years, I've had calls from a resident complaining about another resident who has taken the opportunity to plant the boulevard, which I don't believe we allow. But in any case, and I've seen some of those boulevards and, well, they weren't very pretty. Didn't see a pretty one. Let's put it that way. So I wouldn't, I mean, I would look forward to a report coming back. But if we are going to do this, I think we need to have rules about what kind of plants and trees are allowed, the maintenance, the property standards, the maintenance. I see this as potentially becoming a big time drain on bylaw and potentially not looking good. There's the potential that it could look great, but there's also the potential that it could not look good. And then what do we do about it? So I think there needs to be not only research on what would be appropriate in our area. I think I was online. There's lots on the more arid states, but what would be good in our area? And just we need a lot of rules so that bylaw isn't inundated with angry neighbor complaints, you know. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know too much about Xeriscaping, but the motion is just asking for a feasibility study, and I believe council has approved many motions from council regarding asking for staff reports or feasibility studies. I think all the questions that we all have, I think most of them will be answered by a feasibility study. So for those reasons, I would be in favor. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Camp. Have we had any challenges with any current boulevards damages with some plows or just any kind of maintenance that you're aware of?
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly there are challenges and some damage that occurs on boulevards. It also occurs on the residents' property frontage on the backside of the sidewalk too. And that is taken care of by staff when it is damaged. Something if somebody does plant something on the boulevard, and we have instances where it is within town already, and we have to dig up the boulevard for water service, for a utility comes in, the resident is responsible ultimately for replacing that plant material or whatever they have on that boulevard. We do not approve any hardscaping on the boulevards. But we do, if people do just go ahead and actually do planting, we don't have them remove it unless it's something that obstructs sight lines and is a safety problem for the public.
Counselor?
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Desario. Who's liable if someone were to trip and fall on some river rock that might have spilled on the sidewalk from the town boulevard?
Ms. Desario?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it will depend. So unfortunately, that's the only way I can answer it. It will depend on what we did in order to mitigate that damage. So if we inspected it, if we looked into it, if we maintained it, then we would not be held negligible. But if we didn't do any of those things, then potentially the town would be held liable.
Counselor?
Thank you. And so, I mean, I guess my comment to that is, how are we making that assertion? Right? There's obviously going to be inspections and you have to make sure it's maintained properly. And again, it's on town property. I just feel like that there's a lot more work to this than meets the eye. So I do see that there's liability risks there. I do believe that there's a lot more work involved in maintaining this type of garden. I think it's very subjective, and to be putting rules in place, I just feel like this is a Pandora's box that just, again, I just for me, I don't need the feasibility study just based on the questions I've asked other municipalities and other bylaw departments, and I've asked them some opinions about it. And obviously I have my own professional opinion as a landscape architect and designer myself. If we are really, this is really about, water conservation, there is seed available and sod available, I think first in Canada and BC for drought tolerant sod. And, there's a really great solution. Maintenance to this type of gardening is high. I don't care what anybody says. And any master gardener will know with any type of design, it's not something you plant and it's done overnight. This is a transition that takes years before you can say, I finally made my garden the way it is. And at least 5 years is a minimum master gardener standard to at least say you've been able to turn something into something beautiful from where you started from. For me, I don't need staff to spend 2 weeks of their time putting a report together on this. And so I'm at this time, I am not going to be in favor of what's in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Great thing about getting a report back is your questions get answered. So I'm looking forward to getting a report back on this. And as Ms. Steenkamp mentioned, there are areas within the town that this already exists on boulevards on people's homes. I can tell you that one specific one, that there was a notice of violation issued on it, and hence why I believe that we need to create policy, which is our job as a council. We need to give clear direction to staff to create that policy, so that way our residents understand what the policy is as well. That's essentially what this report will do. Whether we decide to allow it or exclude it and continue to exclude it and say it's not allowed, that is the decision that council will make once we get a feasibility report. If we turn this down tonight, the ones that have been issued notices of violation, they will be forced to return their boulevard to sod immediately. That's the choice of this council. I'll call the vote. That carries. 8.9.1, Councillor Gardner, you pulled this one. Just want to move it? Q, seconder. Councillor Thompson. Go ahead, Councillor Gardner.
And I believe I spoke to this before. The York region has a Vision Zero traveler safety plan to prevent severe collisions. And one of the countermeasures, I believe, uses I'm going to call them red light cameras. And I have a motion pending from maybe 10 years ago about using these cameras specifically around school zones and between the GO station and the town park, where a lot of cars speed. And in light of the feedback I got from the residents during the election, speeding is such it's scary. It's a scary in areas where there are a lot of kids. And so I would like us to, I don't know if we would have to purchase a red light camera or if we would have to rent one, but I think one in the town, if we could just move it around, because people, I understand people are in a hurry and I've been guilty, but I really try and be aware of that, but if you gave me an expensive ticket, I would be more responsible. That's not the right way to put it, but I think you understand what I mean. So I spoke to the CAO just this evening, and I know we have the system in place. I think it's called CRM. AMPS, not customer management system. Okay. The AMPS. I know we have it, and I've been waiting for it for a long time. So if staff would just consider doing some work on this.
Absolutely. Mr. Romero? I know the region is doing work. I know the region has their system in place. I know that Newmarket has theirs in place. They're actually just put out some cameras, but are we going to be having something coming soon to this council in regards to looking at how we move forward?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a report coming September, October related to the automated speed enforcement review that we did and the recommendations on to take a pilot project in town. The region recently approved their own program on regional roads.
Yes.
And they're moving forward, but we have a report coming to council soon.
Thank you.
So Councillor, and you'll notice the regional ones will come through Aurora as well. So they will be in Aurora at times, but just not on our residential streets. But that's what our report's going to.
Yes, I thank you, and I'm aware, but I think it's I think the residents that spoke to me and probably other councillors have a very valid point. They just want their neighborhood safer, and this would be one way to do that. If we could look into it for ourselves. And with response to the response that it's a tax grab, it's not a tax grab. We're trying to have a safe community, and if you just need to comply, and then you don't have to pay any money. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Call vote. That carries. So we'll move to 9.1. This is park development, Thelma Fielding Park Development. Someone want to move the recommendation? Councillor Weiss, seconder. Going once, going twice. Oh, Councillor Thompson, thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Weiss?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking through the report, and a couple of things popped out, and I'd just like to have an explanation. It seems to me that there's 2.6. We're talking about the increase over the previous budget authority, and there's a 2.6 detailed design work and inflation. So that's that's the reason for the increase in the the budget authority. So it seems like a lot. I mean, inflation is one thing, and we're struggling with inflation, but it's certainly not in the order of 50%. So could someone explain to me what the detailed design work that was done that popped this up by 2.6 mil?
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the detailed design work is just a portion of it. Detailed design is in the proximity of 100 or 350,000 for the detailed design. On top of that, there's numerous consultants required, geotechnical, engineering consultants. That's part of that fee too, in addition to the actual tender results that came in based on the park amenities as the design. The washroom building came in well over the estimated value from the design consultant in the tune of roughly $500,000 more than what the cost estimate was. We did reach out and spoke to other municipalities that are building similar facilities. It's right in line with what the market value is currently. We don't have a strong understanding as to why that is. It's just the market value for buildings out there. So we're pinning that base mostly on inflationary. Also, there are amenities within the park that were improved. Number one, the basketball court, multi-use court, has lighting on it, which was a recommendation in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So we included it in this park. So it was an upgrade over and above what we'd considered originally for the park. In addition, there's some rubberized surfacing, both on the playground and on the splash pad. Both of those were not considered in the original design. They were brought forward through the Accessibility Committee and a request from them to have this park a little bit more inclusive when it comes to our playgrounds. There's also an upgrade with a swing component. The Accessibility Committee asked us if we could incorporate a fully accessible swing unit within the park, just because of some constraints for the layout of the playground. We've put in a different option that still gives you a sense of a swing. It's kind of a you get on with your wheelchair or whatever your mobility issues are, and it moves you back and forth, but not in a full swing capacity. It allows for a smaller footprint, but those are some of the added value. Also, where the artificial turf field is, there's some grade challenges, and to provide full accessibility up into that venue, then we needed to put in some ramping for accessibility, and because of the concrete works, et cetera, those have added up within the tender. The actual footprint of the property has some constraints just due to the way the road curves around. If you've looked at the design, it also, we've had to put in some higher fencing just to contain any balls or anything within that field, which is over and above the normal height of fencing on artificial turf.
Nelson?
Very well. Good answer. Thank you. And for what it's worth, I mean, I think this is important for us to be able to partner up with school boards and schools like this, because it's a perfect use of our time and the available land that we have. So no problems there. Could you give me a little bit of information on the contract that we have with them for school use versus community use? Because I know what the one we have at St. Max is, but I haven't seen any comments about what the contractual arrangement is for community use, what time it starts, how late it goes, Saturdays, Sundays, because I know both SAC and SAS have very robust needs for sport and sport competition. So I'm wondering if they're any different than we've had previous at St. Max through you, Ms. Steenkamp.
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're currently working through that with SAS. They have a fairly similar demand to the same agreement that we have with St. Max, though they do have some additional use that they would like on some weekends and into the evenings on certain days of the week, and even monthly for that matter. On top of that, they are looking for, their school year runs a little bit different than a typical traditional school year. So they're just looking for a shoulder season into August. But it really doesn't affect a whole lot of our recreational play when it comes to our house leagues. So we're just working through that right now.
Okay,
Counselor?
thank you. And the only last question I have is the name. I don't recognize the name. I'm sure somebody does. The Thelma Fielding. Could you just give me an idea of where the name came from?
I'll start, Ms. Steenkamp, and if you want to help me if I don't. First female elected official in the town of Aurora, I believe. And we felt that since it was close to an all-girls school, that it was most appropriate.
Super. Thank you.
Councilor Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Steenkamp. Ms. Steenkamp, I'm glad to see that there are trees included in this design for shade. How many trees are we going to be cutting down to enable this?
Steenkamp.
I'm sorry, I should have emailed you that.
Ms.
Yeah,
Steenkamp.
okay.
I was just going to say I'm unable to tell you at this point in time. I will tell you that the site is currently has been cleared. So there were
Right.
trees cut down, but I can't tell you exactly how many.
Councilor.
Correct. A lot of trees were cleared before we gave permission. I'm looking at the attachment 1 that has the design of the park. With respect to the pickleball, I'm glad it was moved. I noted that it's lit because of the sound that the pickleball makes. Do you know what the intention is? How late we're going to be running that lighting?
Steenkamp.
If we function it like every other court within the town of Aurora, lights are on till 11 p.m.
Okay, well,
Councilor.
I would strongly object to that. I'm trying to figure out on the east side, I think that's the public parking area that runs off Shining Hill Avenue. Am I
Yes.
right on that?
Steenkamp.
The ones with the trees in the parking lot.
If you're referring to the piece of parking lot that is east of the park and north of Daydream Court, that is actually the trailhead parking.
Is what?
Is trailhead parking. There's like a trail
Right.
that's part of the development and a future trail that we will be constructing, and that's to facilitate that.
Councilor.
So where is the public parking for using the facilities? I mean, because I know that it's a neighborhood park, but it's not a neighborhood park now.
Ms. Steenkamp, I believe that's to the left. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, it is actually runs off of Shining Hill Avenue, directly opposite of that park. You'll see it in front of the washroom structure and between the pickleball and the multi-use court. Just to the right of it is the main parking for the park. We also have access to St. Anne's School. The parking lot on the opposite side, it would be the west of the field. We have access to that parking for the full facility for our use.
Councilor.
So I'm not looking at my report. I think we said there were going to be about 10 parking spaces. So in this long parking area that borders the field, some of those are for people who are driving to the park.
Those will, through you, Mr. Mayor, those will be primarily used for the field facility. The people that will be driving to the park will be the parking that's on the east side.
Councilor.
Thank you. Because the parking on the east side, I'm not even sure how you would get to the washroom.
Councilor, just so when you're looking at the picture,
Yeah.
you see the parking lot and you can visibly see the two accessible spots and right in front of a structure. You see that parking lot right there in the picture?
Sure. Is it on the?
See that one right there?
Yeah.
Right there? That is the public parking.
Right. So And where is the washroom?
Right there in front of the accessible spots.
Okay. That's,
Correct, Ms. Steenkamp? Yes.
that's excellent.
The one on the other side that you referenced first is parking for the trailhead. For access to the trail, which is opposite of the park. And then the one on the other side of the field is St. Anne's for the field, but we were going to be able to utilize that as well.
Thank you. It's unclear to me how you would get to the park. Okay, okay. I think I see that.
You see it?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Thompson?
Thank you. I guess through you to Mrs. Steenkamp or Mr. Furman, whichever. You know, for the most part, reading through the report, I understand the rationale behind the increases with regards to upgrades and or changes since the preliminary design, as well as just the realization as we've gone out to tender and other projects as well, the costs in general have escalated and we've seen tenders come back higher than anticipated. And so I get that piece, but the one part I'm struggling with in the report is the request to increase the contingency from 10% to 15%. And so perhaps you can take a little bit of time to explain that. Typically in the projects we've greenlit in the past, 10% has been the contingency amount. So I'd like to understand why you want the increase, but I'd also like to put it in terms of real dollars. So if the contingency was 10% in the original budget authority, if the project was $4.5 million, to me, that means 10% contingency was around $400,000. Now at 7.3 million, it means the contingency is now $1 million. So I'd like to understand why we're doubling the amount in real dollars.
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just due to uncertainty and the potential for, while we've done soil investigation or the consultant has done the soil investigation, it's a large facility that needs a significant amount of excavation, and most of the primary problems that do occur during construction are with the soils. The geotechnical tells us right now that we're fairly stable, but we do know on the property, because we've only done test holes. We haven't done, I believe there were maybe 20 test holes done on the 4 acres, which is normal. It's actually more than normal for a site like that. But we do know from just some historical data that what was done with the property, that there may be buried material within that area, just from the previous owner. So there are some concerns that if we run into something like that, we may have to accommodate any increases for haulage, for disposal of those materials if they are found.
And
Councilor?
Thank you. As a follow-up through you to Ms. Steenkamp, what prevents you from coming back to council and making a request to increase the budget at that time due to these unforeseen circumstances?
Ms. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly could do that. It would be a timing issue, certainly with the contractor. It could delay the project, depending on when those issues came to, when we became aware of them, and the amount of time that it would take council to actually get the report into council and for a decision to be made.
Councilor?
You know, I in my time here on council, it always seems that the contingency account gets maxed out. And so I'd rather not increase it. I'd rather see that if a significant issue were to incur that we think would warrant an increase, that staff come back to council, inform us of it, let us understand the issue and or the change orders associated with it, and we can increase the budget at that time. We've done it before.
CEO?
Through Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, first of all, the 2 other funding partners were supportive of this approach as well because of the unknowns. So they felt that they would be prepared to pay their share of that increased contingency should it be required. And just to emphasize the timing aspect of it, if that contingency comes up, for example, if the extra expense comes up in July or August, we have the added complication of trying to get a council meeting. It would have to be potentially a special meeting just for that subject. And we are trying to have the field completed and usable for the next school year in September. So we are quite tight. And so while we could do, as Councillor Thompson has suggested, it does add a little bit of risk to the completion for September.
Counselor?
I guess my only point to that is we already have an existing contingency of $500,000. So you feel that that $500,000 will be utilized quickly. And so we may run into this issue, or are you saying that you think this one issue will exceed $500,000? Through you to Mr. Nadarozny.
Sale?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any specific concern about a specific item that would cause the contingency. It was just more of a proactive approach to meeting the timeline and not being held up should we run into something. If we went with 10%, we'd be at 700,000 instead of the million. So you know, we're hoping that certainly that we're completing within that 10% contingency. So it's not a showstopper, it's just a potential timing issue, that's all.
Counselor?
That's my comment.
Thank you. Counselor Gallo?
Thank you. I have similar concerns. We have a $2.6 million over budget coming straight to council. Public had 4 days, 5 max, 2 of which are weekends to even review this. And this is a direct and the first result of a new and, in my opinion, ridiculous meeting regime that, Mr. Mayor, you've implemented. We would have discussed this last week if we had a GC under the normal regime, but it comes straight to council because of the new regime that now we're forced to make a $2.6 million over budget. It's already a $4.3 million project. It just goes to show you it goes on. And to Councillor Thompson's point, had we had more meetings, we could have been in front of any overages. And I agree, we shouldn't be giving this 15%, and it should be council that decides. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Nadarozny, as you know, I asked for the bid documents, and I won't go into any details other than just to ask, to what extent did the town review the bid documents in the same regime that we would if this was our project?
Sale?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask Ms. Steenkamp to comment on that, but I believe our park staff were as intimately involved with the reviewing the tender results as if it was our own tender.
Ms. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that Mr. Nadarozny is correct. Our park staff were intimately involved through the whole process, from design right through tender and to the evaluation of the tender.
Counselor?
And through you, Mr. Chair, does the finance department normally review tenders?
Ms. Mayor Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that the procurement division within finance department review tenders, but the finance staff not necessarily. We would only be supportive through providing funding options for if there's additional funds required.
Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, did the procurement division of the finance department review the tenders?
Ms. Mayor Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, not to my knowledge.
Counselor?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of red flags on this, as much as I support the project, particularly at 4.5 million. There's a lot of reasons why this is an issue. And I'm now here at council, the last opportunity, because as I understand it, if we don't do it now, it doesn't open for September. And then we have SAS that has issues. And through no fault of our own, I'm now having to make a $2.6 million over budget decision tonight, having seen this, albeit in advance of the public, but a week ago. And that's an issue. Through you, Mr. Chair, do we normally have washrooms in neighborhood parks?
Ms. Steenkamp, I believe this is a community park, but Ms. Steenkamp?
This is a community park. It is housed with community amenities. It just is within a neighborhood park footprint.
Counselor?
And do we normally have washrooms in, well, in the reports, it was a community, it was a neighborhood park, but okay, in the neighborhood park footprint, a community park.
In a, through you, Mr. Mayor, in a community park, we have washrooms. It's not unlike any park that has large facilities with splash pads, playgrounds, courts, and fields.
Counselor?
And through you, Mr. Chair, when did the $4.4939 million budget estimate come to council? When was the first time we saw that?
Ms. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it was April or May of 2023.
Counselor?
And it would have been in the last year's budget in the fall.
Correct.
So in 1 year, you know, the blaring question to me, and I'm sure to most, and I hope to most, is how did we get the estimates so wrong in 1 year?
Just through the chair, everyone. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the budget that was established in 2023, actually it was late 2022. That was like a Class E estimate. It was a baseline for the amenities that we'd had on the table at the time. Those amenities have been upgraded, as I indicated, and this is actually a true tender cost.
Counselor?
Well, I'll leave it at that. It's a over 50% increase. Surely we would have revisited in the fall when we had a budget before us, that budget. And if we had any indication that it would have been higher than the just under 4.5 million, perhaps adjustments should have be made then. As it stands, I won't be supporting this.
Counselor Kim, first time?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For you to Ms. Steenkamp, so the artificial or turf typically lasts 8 to 10 years. My understanding is, you know, we're partnering with Shining Hill Developments and St. Anne's School for all of these aspects of the park. So when Shining Hill Developments, after 8, 10 years, they're no longer going to be here with us. So is it our understanding that the responsibility of the turf will be just St. Anne's School in the town now?
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the turf will be a town asset. It will be on town land. The school is contributing the 2.5 or 2.25 million to the project. And once that is contributed, that asset will be town owned, and all capital repairs and replacement will be the responsibility of the town unless there's an agreement otherwise.
Counselor?
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Counselor Gardner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was against this from the beginning, mostly on the basis that we were taking a neighborhood park and making it a community park. I felt to advantage a private school. And there were many other issues, including costs that have increased substantially. So I just don't think this is appropriate. Thank you.
Counselor Weiss, second.
Yeah, my question also has to do with the overage and how the split was arranged. And I'm making an assumption that we've had conversation with St. Anne's and or SAC or whoever is on the other side, that they're okay with the increase that we're asking them. So could you just tell me how the split, since we're increasing this significantly, how the split was created and calculated so that we're taking the lion's share of the increases that are there as opposed to splitting that? I see that Shining Hill is not adding anything into it. So this is really on the backs of the town and St. Anne's, I presume. So through you to Ms. Steenkamp.
Mr. Sale, I'm going to go.
Or to the CAO. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the initial discussion with the partners was on the basis that We started from putting an allowance in for the park that the town would build in that space. And so that would be a base cost for the town. And then the premise we worked on is that if the town could get a turf field and the other amenities, the scoreboards and so on, at a significantly reduced price, we would, put that field in what would normally not be the perfect location that we would use, because there wasn't enough room to do it. And so that original discussion was on a third basis, a third from Shining Hill, a third from St. Anne's School, and a third from the town. Now that got further diluted, or say not even diluted. Then that was for the field itself. Then there was a discussion about the scoreboard and the stands. And we agreed, staff agreed that we would see value from that with a turf field, that we would be interested in having the stands and the scoreboard. And so those two components of the agreement were basically 50-50 between the town and St. Anne's School. So the first thing that happened, though, was early in the negotiations, the partners at Shining Hill weren't prepared to contribute a full third, and they wished to limit their contribution at the time to $750. 500 of which was a direct contribution to the project. So almost like a donation as opposed to funding any specific aspect, but 500,000 cash that they would put into the project. An additional $250,000 that they would do in-kind works on the site when they were doing the work that they would normally do to hand the field over to us or the land over to the town to do a park. While they're doing that work, they're going to do some of the basic preparatory work to actually put the field in. So they'll go farther than they would, and that's where the extra 250 comes in terms of added value. So that was all in the capital project originally that council saw at the last budget. Subsequently, there was a lot of changes, as Ms. Steenkamp outlined, in terms of where they were driven from and what changes occurred. And so we took the final result, and then the tender process also further started slicing and dicing components of it. So all concrete works are in the tender as one, and they're all kind of broken out. So we attempted to go back then and to parallel as closely as we could the original model, which was the base cost for a town, a third, and how would that change the split? Now there was no increased contribution from Shining Hill. So that was going to be a static 750. So the cost differences were primarily to the town and to St. Anne's School. We attempted, again, going through the tender document, all the detail, we attempted to separate those components into the same way, and the town took their share, and the other part was basically the town contributed 1/3. The only difference to all of that is the actual artificial turf, where there is a bit of a benefit to the town, as Ms. Steenkamp outlined in the report. We do get expanded use of that longer lifespan. But since that was primarily driven by St. Anne's School, they've paid by far the lion's share of that upgrade as a separate addition to the project. So that's a lot of detail, but that's how the basis of the original discussion and then the conversion of that original discussion and the original report that came to council got interpreted for the actual tender results.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It explains it completely. I'm okay with these numbers. Of course, we're not, a lot of the increase is because of upgrades and things that we've wanted to do on that site for the benefit of our community. So I'm okay that. I do agree with Councillor Gallo about the lack of time we have to do the consultation with various people on this, but the report is very fulsome. And I do know that we need this field. It's an opportunity for us to have flat table land that we can use for a variety of things, and it'll be a high-class facility, one of the unique in the town with the scoreboards and all the rest of it. So I'm in favor of this, but I'd really like to have, we need to do something about getting our reports earlier so that we can do the investigation and the things that we need to make sure that we're doing our diligence. So thank you, CAO.
Councillor Gallo, second time.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Do we normally have a list of eligible contractors that we restrict our bids to? Or can anyone submit a bid at any time? This is a $7.3 million project.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for a construction contract, the only ones who would not be eligible would be anyone that's on the suspended supplier list that the procurement team maintains.
Counselor.
So do we, through you, Mr. Chair, do we maintain a list, or do people have to submit anything in order to submit a bid to the town? Qualifying in any way?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it depends on how the procurement is done. In some cases with large construction projects, there may be a pre-qualification process that happened. I believe that's the way the Aurora Town Square project was handled. In some other cases, depending on the type of construction, it may just go out to open tender without a pre-qualification process.
Counselor.
And through you, so anyone could submit a bid. Any company that was opened up yesterday could submit a bid, and we would have no idea, and we would issue it to them.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there are typically required qualifications that are identified on the bid. So usually it leads to different levels of experience or history, and there's also a requirement to provide references, and they would go through that process. But if it's an RFT that's just based on price, as long as they meet the requirements, the mandatory requirements, and the references are good, it would go with the lowest bid.
Counselor.
Thank you. And I think that's what I was getting to. There is a process that we go to, surely, to qualify potential tenders. My question is, did we do that in this $7.3 million project?
Ms. Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the consultant did do this. They vetted the bidders prior to even inviting them to bid. This is a different process because it was done through a private entity. It wasn't issued by the town. It wasn't a public call for tender, but they treated it somewhat similar to a public call, or shall I say, similar to our pre-qualification that we would do ourselves. So we vetted in consultation with the town and the consultant and SAS and the developer. Everybody's familiar with quite a few different contractors and their ability to do the work. So that list was vetted through us, and the contractor had to provide references as to the type of work that they'd done, whether they'd done work regarding artificial turfs, and then those were the ones that were selected to bid.
Counselor.
And to you, that was done for the winning bidder. This is not an estimate. This is the winning bidder that will be proceeding.
Steenkamp.
It was done for all of the bidders that bid on the project for Thelma Fielding Park.
And through you, who reviewed those? Just a consultant, or did our staff review it?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, it was a collection of bidders that were vetted through the town, the developer, the consultant, and SAS.
No, sir.
Through you, so when you say the town, it wasn't the procurement. Who was it?
No, it wasn't, through you, Mr. Mayor, it wasn't specifically procurement. It was park staff who were familiar with construction and the contractors that we were looking at.
Counselor.
They're not public documents, obviously, and I wish I could go to more detail. You can all get them if you like, and I reviewed them thoroughly, and I have a lot of questions about the winning bidder. Unfortunately, I can't say that publicly, but there's still a lot of red flags to this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. Just going back to the contingency issue, it's my understanding that the field, I guess the idea is for it to be utilized in September. If that is the case, then, the biggest issue, which is causing the increase in the contingency, is respect to the soil. So that would be identified early on in the process. So I'm not too worried about the timing. I think that can be addressed through it. But I guess my question, and I'm not sure whether it's best directed to the clerk or to Mrs. Wainwright Van Kessel, but if council approves the motion as is in terms of revising the budget authority, but then makes an amendment that in order to
exceed the 10% of the contingency requires further council approval. Is that contrary? So in other words, to release the funds from the extra past the 10%. So, rather than trying to figure out all these numbers here on the spot by reducing the contingency, I guess I would put forward an amendment that council approval is required to exceed whatever that amount is of the 10% contingency. And so should it happen, staff would come back to council. They would explain to members of council and to the public, if necessary, what has been the issues driving the spending for the contingency account, what the change orders are, and why they need the additional funds.
Seconder,
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Councillor Kim.
And although we are approving the budget authority, obviously we, on council, we understand that if the project is under budget, that money just gets returned back to reserves anyways. So we're just restricting the last piece of the contingency, which I think achieves the same thing as changing the budget authority. So I'd put forward that amendment.
Any comments to the amendment? Everyone understands what the amendment is? Yeah, just give me a second. I'll get it on the screen. We don't wordsmith that much around here. Our clerk hopes he thinks he's got it. Right. Is that good, Councillor? Yeah. Councillor Kim, you second it? That's fine. Everyone understand? Call a vote. That carries. Back to the main motion as amended. Councillor Thompson, you still have the floor. You're good. Anyone else? So none. I'm just going to clarify one point that was brought up in the discussion. The fact that this is in front of us at council has nothing to do with the meeting structure. I was absolutely prepared to call a special committee meeting last week. The report wasn't ready, hence why it's in front of us today, straight at council. Call vote. That carries. Council, do we want to take a break or do we got one more item and then our bylaws? I'll leave it to you guys. What do you want to do? Yeah, it's an informational report. Should we just keep going? Yeah. Yeah, keep going. It's just for information, this one. This is just an informational report. Yeah. Okay. All right. You can still comment if you like. Yeah. So Councillor Thompson, you want to move this? Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Reese, any comments or questions on this report? Yeah. No comments? Councillor Reese?
I guess the question I have was partly, and some of them were partly answered in the additional information that was provided. I'm still not convinced that enough work has been done on this to be able to discriminate between what we've done in the past and what we would like to do in the future in order to make this pilot something that we can do full time, because I believe we want to do this for our seniors and those people who are disabled in the community. So I'd really like some effort put into looking at alternatives, ways to reduce the cost, but keep the service available to those people. The other thing that has come to my attention a number of times is that the eligibility criteria may have been subverted in a number of ways, because we hear of 65-year-olds who have an able-bodied a person living with them. And so I think the notion of fairness and equity to our seniors and to those people who are disabled need to be resolved a little bit better than it has before. I don't know if it can be perfectly done, and I know we've done a lot of work on trying to make the eligibility right, but I think that's another thing we ought to consider besides looking at alternate methods of delivery. We also should take a look at the opportunity to tighten up the eligibility requirements to make sure that those people are truly disabled and those people are truly over 65, and that there's no one in the house that is able to clear the windrow are clear, because it really gets down to the integrity of the program, and we want to have the program to have that integrity. So those are my only comments on this. And if you'd like to refer that to someone, then I'd be happy to do that.
So Councillor, what I'll make a suggestion, I'm going to go to Councillor Gardner after, and anyone else that wants to comment. But we can refer the entire, basically, report back to staff,
Right.
have them address the concerns and report back to council. And I would say that the latest that we could do that is, I heard from Marcio, July, unless he comes back and changes his mind. So they could have up to July to address all these concerns that we have and come back with a more fulsome report that addresses those concerns. And then we can make a call whether we want to move forward for 2025.
Yeah, and that's why we have it now instead of in October or November when it's a crisis. We have that time to take a really good look at this and get it right. And we had an unusual winter last year, and so that has to factor into it too. So that's all I'm asking.
Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Gardner first, and then I'll get you if you want to put that referral on the floor, Council.
Okay,
go ahead, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. And we did get an email from a resident, and one of the things she was talking about was that one neighbor signed up for, I imagine they were townhouses or row houses, signed up for the Windrow program, and we ended up clearing both driveways. So there are things that need to be tightened up. So I like the referral back to staff.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Weiss for the referral. Councillor Weiss, refer. So someone want to second that refer? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Just give it a second. We'll get it up on the screen. So everyone got that? Everyone good? Councillor Weiss, you good? Councillor Thompson, you good? Councillor Gardner, you had something to add?
I have a comment to thank Mr. Coangelo for staying through this whole meeting for this very brief discussion, and asking if in the future, if we have a staff visiting, maybe we move up the agenda item. Thank
Councillor, if you like, you could always ask him a question. We can get him up to the mic.
No, but
No?
next time, can we put this report at the beginning of the meeting?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call the vote. That carries. New business. Councillor Weiss, Councillor Gillan, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gallo.
As a result of personal matters, hopefully for a short time, I will be resigning from all committees, which include library, JCC, trails, and heritage, effective immediately.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, new business? I just got one, and it's not really new business, but it's our only opportunity to mention this. So we're just pleased to announce the appointment of 2 new members to the following committees: Accessibility Advisory Committee, Sean Noble, and the Heritage Advisory Committee, Rocco Morcillo. We thank them for putting their names forward, and we're looking forward to their contributions to the municipality. Bylaws. Councillor Gardner, I think you wanted to pull one separately.
could you pull 1 and 2 and I can speak to them at the same time?
1 and 2.
Yes, please.
Okay, so do you want, are we gonna keep those two together though?
Yep.
That's fine to keep those two together? Okay, so we'll do 1 and 2 together. Why don't we do that first so you can speak to it? So go ahead, speak to those two.
Thank you. And probably a separate vote on them though.
You didn't want to move them, did you?
No, I don't
No.
want
Can
to.
I get a mover for 1 and 2? Counselor Thompson, seconder?
Thank you.
Hold on a second. I need to get a seconder. Bylaws 1 and 2.
They're about 15 Green Steeple.
I got no seconder. Counselor Kemp, thank you. Counselor Gardner, go ahead.
Wow. Thank you, Counselor Kim. Bylaw number 1 is to, again, this is 15 Green Steeple, is to amend our official plan that was already amended and given a site-specific amendment. And specifically, it intensified what was allowed in cluster residential. And the second one, is a bylaw. We're doing it on land that was subject to an Ontario Municipal Board order. So we are contravening that OMB ruling by further increasing the density on this land. And, why are we going against our official plan and the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan to increase density on this sensitive? So why are we going against the Oak Ridges? Where shall I start back from? Councillor Thompson? I beg your pardon?
Just trying to fix them.
So it contravenes our, as I spoke last time, as you well know, Councillor Thompson, it contravenes our official plan with respect to cluster residential, which we've already given increased permission on density. It contravenes the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. This is environmentally sensitive land. It contravenes an order from the Ontario Municipal Board that gave this a density exception, and now we're giving it another density exception. And from what I can see, we're just doing all of these things to increase the developer's profit, and I just think it's not right. So I will be voting against both of these bylaws.
And you want them called separately, or are they together? Okay.
Let's do them separately for the record.
We do them separately. The vote. Thank you. 11.1 first. All the vote. That carries. 11.2. Call the vote. Councilor Weiss. Oh, went in. That carries. 11.3, 11.4, and 11.5. You move it. Thank you. Councilor Thompson moves. Seconder. Councilor Weiss, thank you. Any comments or questions on these bylaws? Call the vote. That carries. Confirming bylaw. Someone like to move that? Counselor Weiss, Counselor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Motion to adjourn. Counselor Kim. Counselor Weiss, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.